greatest questions that you can answer in your life is, what do I want people to say about me when I'm gone? What do I want people to say about me when I'm gone? He said, if you'll answer that question, that helps you determine your goals. It helps you think about what your priorities are. It helps you think about what's important in your life. And so I'm doing a little research on that thing. You know how it is when you get on Google and you're doing research and you sort of go this way and that way. You follow some rabbit trails. And one of the rabbit trails that I found as we're thinking about what people say about us when we're gone were epitaphs. And I found some very interesting epitaphs, very interesting things written on tombstones for people. And now these are epitaphs that have become famous over time, even though they're not for famous people. But look at this. This is one in Uniontown, Pennsylvania. The epitaph reads, "Here lies the body of Jonathan Blake. Stepped on the gas instead of the brake." It's good. It's good. All right, here's one. "Here lies Johnny Yeast. Pardon me for not rising." It's a bad joke. It's a bad joke. Anyway, these are real. Now, this is one from Silver City, Nevada. So think Wild West. It said, here lays Butch. We planted him raw. He was quick on the trigger, but slow on the draw. Right? Listen to this one. This takes a little thinking. Here lies Ezekiel Eichel, age 102. The good die young. Right? And here's one. They didn't give the name of the person, but it's from Thurmont, Maryland. And it says, "Here lies an atheist, all dressed up and no place to go." Interesting. All right, but then as I was doing it, I found some epitaphs of famous people. And these were super interesting. They made me think. Here's Martin Luther King Jr. His says, "Free at last, free at last. Thank God Almighty, I'm free at last." See the double meaning? I mean, that's so cool. Andrew Carnegie, big business tycoon. "Here lies a man who knew how to enlist the service of better men than himself." It's pretty cool, humble thing to say. Here's one, Alexander the Great. Remember the guy who conquered so many nations? It says, "A tomb now suffices him for whom the world was not enough." That's sobering to think about that. Al Capone. His says, "My Jesus, mercy." And then Mel Blanc. Do you guys know who Mel Blanc is? He's the voice of all those cartoon characters. His says, "That's all, folks." That's what it is, right? So I'm looking at these and I'm thinking, man, what is the question? How would you answer that question? What do you want people to say about you when you're gone? How do you evaluate? What criteria do you use as you look back at your life to go, man, I did it right, or man, I've got some regrets? Is it fame? You know, I got 16 minutes of fame instead of the regular 15 that everybody else gets. Or maybe you've got 1,000 Facebook friends, and so you feel like, man, my life is worthwhile because people know who I am. Or maybe it's wealth. I died with a certain amount of money in the bank or a certain amount of toys in the garage. That's how I know I'll do a good job. Or maybe for you, it's the titles that you've acquired. You want more degrees than a thermometer, right? You want to be the MD and the PhD and the, whatever D, right? Or maybe for you, it's YOLO. It's kind of an old term, but you remember that, right? It's kind of cool a year ago. You only live once. So get in all the experiences that you can. Go out, visit all these different countries and go skydiving and be an adrenaline junkie. And you just, you only live once. And maybe that's you. Where you say, I know I'm going to live a full life if I could have that kind of exciting experience. Or maybe for you, it's your kids. If my kids get out, they're doing well, then I'll know that I've had a successful, fulfilling life. Listen, we only have one life to invest. And so we want to invest it wisely. You know this and I know this. Whatever goals you have, if they're good goals, it's going to take sacrifice to reach them. Whatever your goals are, you're going to have to sacrifice time, money, effort, whatever it is, to reach them. And so, as we're doing this devoted series, and we're preparing our church to take the biggest step we have ever taken as a church. If you're brand new, this is a good time to be here because you are going to see the absolute heart of our church to do the biggest thing we've ever done to try to reach people and to make God famous. That's us. That's what we're trying to do. But because it's such a big thing, let me show you the things, actually. We're going all in for mission. This is the all in for mission. We're trying to do $9 million over the next 2 years to help our church stay healthy. We know that as you build buildings and do things to make more room for people, if you're not a healthy church, then it doesn't make a lot of sense, right? If we don't have the staff we need, if we can't pay the electric bill, if we can't have the animal crackers for the little kids on Sundays or whatever, we don't want the buildings to choke our general budget. So this is kind of the general budget of the church over the next 2 years. We want to stay generous as a church in the community and everything that we do, right? I don't want our culture to change as a church, all right? But here's the thing. If we are healthy, healthy things grow. And we've grown 1,000 people a year over the last 2 years. And if that continues to grow at that kind of pace, I mean, look around you. We don't have room. And so we've got to go all in for the vision, which is expanding these facilities. We have the Ann Arbor facility down there where we're going from 12,000 square feet of a building. We're going to move about a mile away to a 27-acre plot of land with 55,000 square foot warehouse on it. We'll show you a video in a little bit and show you, the look of that warehouse. But we're going to create space down there. And here in Brighton, we're going to open up some parking. Amen, Pastor. We're going to create some parking out there. We're going to do 30% more parking, 30% more room in this room, so we can have more seats for people, 30% more space in kids' areas. I told you a few weeks ago that we had 38 2-year-olds in one classroom. Let that sink in, people, okay? 38 2-year-olds. And so we're going to create some more space for people, and that's what this is. Now, if we do this, we're going to create room for people to grow, for the next few years, which is awesome. But even beyond this, what if we didn't just focus on our church, but what if we focused on the church? We want to be all in for multiplication. And so we're setting aside $1 million to try to reproduce as many churches as we can. Our goal is 20 churches by the year 2020. We're going to do them outside of our country in Haiti, hopefully Poland. We're doing Miles City down in Northville down there. We're going to try to create as many churches as we can, and that $1 million will give us a great start over the next 2 years. So this is a 2-year journey. If you add up all those numbers, it's $20 million, okay? That's a lot of money. It's a lot of money. And so it takes all of us to be on board. So we started a few weeks ago looking at calibrating our heart. We got to get our heart in the right place. Because if people walk through a building, we could build buildings all day long. But if people walk into a community where we're selfish or we're self-focused or we don't care to help people or we're not, ready to take care of people or disciple people, then it's no good, right? If our heart's not in the right place. So we looked at that first. We looked at trusting God. Trust God with whatever He calls us to do. We looked at transformation. Brad talked about transformation last week. I'm going to look at sacrifice today. And then next week is our Commitment Sunday. It should be an epic weekend. If that advanced commitment night that we did on Friday night is any indication, when we come here on June 6th and 7th, we're actually filling out cards and we're putting them in. And the reason we do that is 2 reasons. We're going to put a number on those cards that represents the next 2 years of what we believe we can give as a family. And we do that for 2 reasons. One is our relationship with God. You know and I know, when you write down a goal, it's like a different level of goal. And so you write that down, you put it up there, and your family, we're going to shoot for that. We're going to go on a faith journey with God to try to get there, right? That's one reason we do it. The other reason we write that down and we turn that in is because I want to be a good planner. There is so many big factors that go over the next 2 years. Will we sell the Ann Arbor building? How much will we grow as a people? How do the finances work? What are construction costs? I want to have a great number with commitments from you all so that we can plan well. And so I believe next week is going to be an epic worship service as people come with prepared, prayed through faith commitments for the next 2 years. All right? And here's the deal. After saying all of that, all of those all-ins, I want you to know that $20 million is not my primary goal. It's just not. If I could just look each one of you in the eyes and say, my primary goal in this entire thing is 100% participation. We have grown so quickly as a church. What that means is we have a lot of people that are just kind of checking things out. We have spectators. I'm trying to create family. I'm trying to create church. We're trying to maintain culture around here. So I'm going to take people from consumer to contributor. I want to see 100% of the people in our church participating in this thing. That is my number one goal. And I'll tell you why, too. Because we live in a culture, and we're all products of that culture, where we live in a culture where we do not have, where for a lot of people, financial peace is not a reality. There are so many folks in our culture where you talk about college savings, you talk about retirement, people start having anxiety attacks. Their hearts start to beat more quickly. You start to talk about generosity, either to a church or to a neighbor in need. People start to feel guilty rather than joy. You start to talk about how much debt people have, people start to feel guilty. Why? Because our financial houses are many times not in order. I'm not talking about the amount of money we have. I'm talking about the money that we do have. Is God a part, and is He the Lord over that part of our lives? Does God, for most of it, does God reign in that area of your life? Or is that something that you keep from Him? You know what I thought about the other day? God is not looking at this 20 million. He's not sitting up in heaven going, oh my goodness, I hope those people are going to be able to come up with that $20 million. Like, God doesn't need our money, right? He's not up there going, oh my goodness, if 242 doesn't come through, I don't know how I'm going to run this universe. I just don't know. Like, God does not need our money. We need to give it. Let me tell you why. God's not looking for money out of our pockets. He's looking for idols out of our heart. I really believe that. There are those of us that are in the grip of discontent. That's why we're always wanting more and more. The grip of materialism, where we try to get joy and fulfillment from our stuff. There are those of us who are in the grip of saying, you know what, my security is going to come from 401k rather than my security coming from God. And guys, that is messed up. And we will not be able to put our heads on the pillows at night having peace until we allow God to reign in every area of our life. And so today, I'm trying to prepare us for the sacrifice of generosity that we'll commit to next week. That's what we're doing as a family today. Now listen, generosity has been a hallmark of Christianity since the beginning. If you look at that early passage, Acts 2:42 through 47, it says in there that people had irrational generosity. People would sell things to give anyone as had need. Paul talked about the church in Macedonia who's going through a hard time but somehow gave in a way that didn't make sense to help another church. And people celebrated that kind of stuff. And can I just say, if you're brand new, one of the things you are walking into is a community of people that celebrates generosity. For those of you who've been here for a while, would you say that's true? I mean, if I sat down with you and I said, hey, tell me over a cup of coffee or, a donut or whatever, if I said, hey, tell me over the last year that you've been here, over the last 10 years, however long you've been, tell me some of your favorite memories of being a part of this community. Well, somebody would say something about, oh man, Brad had a message, blew me away, right? Or somebody would say, oh man, Jason sang a song one time, and I'm telling you what, he hit a high note that it was just like, oh, the clouds opened up, the angels popped out. I mean, I was ready to ask that song into my heart. It was amazing, right? Anyway, we would talk about that. But I think it wouldn't take long for most of the people that's been around our church to start remembering things like, You know, one of my favorite memories is when right after church we just said, hey, we need to go out and let's just go out and get groceries and bring them back for Gleaners Food because they need help. And we just said, let's go do it. And so we just did it. And we brought like 9 tons of food and fed hundreds and hundreds of people for months. That was one of the things that I love about this place. Or when we said, you know what, on the spur of the moment, let's help healers. Let's help Hope Clinic. And we just said, hey, let's give money to Hope Clinic. And we had $15,000 like that y'all just gave. Or we said, hey, let's go out and help servers. Remember that? We said, let's go out and tip servers big. And we went out and all these servers are just like, I can't believe what these people did, you know. And because you guys were giving like $50 tips on $14 bills. It's awesome. We would celebrate that stuff. You'd talk about small groups. My small group took the free stuff van out. And we went into a neighborhood and we just gave out candy to kids. And their faces just lit up as we told them, hey, Jesus loves you. Jesus loves you. Or you would talk about, hey, remember when we gave money? We did this, a few of you are here for this. This is like 6 years ago. We gave money from the church to all of our small groups. And we just said, go out and bless the community. We trust you. Just go out and bless the community. And we had a couple of groups that pulled their money together when gas was $5 a gallon. And they worked it out with a gas station to pay down the gas to $2.42 a gallon, right? And they had hundreds of cars, and Channel 4 News picked up that thing. I mean, I'm telling you, the culture around here, you guys, if you think about some of your favorite stuff for us, it's celebrating the acts of generosity of this church and this place. You remember the time that we gave away an entire offering? We just said everything that comes in today, we're giving it away. And up to that point, up to that point, the average offering in our church was $16,000 a week. That was kind of the average. It was hovering around. And I said, next week, let's just give away everything that comes in. And that week, we didn't give away $16,000. We gave away $96,000. It was awesome. It was awesome. So anyway, and I could go on. It's just the kind of people that you are. And so this is a celebration kind of a deal. Well, Jesus is coming to the end of his life. And he wants to talk about, hey, how do you invest your life? How do you make sure that what you're doing with your life is something where you can look back and say, yes, that is a life well lived. And he tells a story called the parable of the talents. Maybe you've heard of it before. It's in Matthew 25. And I'm just going to walk us through this story and give us some of the principles that are found in here. All right? It says in verse 14, Matthew 25, it says, again, it will be like a man going on a journey who called his servants and entrusted his wealth to them. You can't be a generous person or a generous church until you come to the realization that the wealth is the landowners. That's who owns it. That everything is God. Psalm 24 says this, the earth is the Lord's and everything in it. Now, I don't know if anybody's ever told you that before, but that is the truth. Everything is the Lord's. So even though your name is on the mortgage and your name is on the car title or whatever, everything is the Lord's. At least that's what a Christ follower feels about stuff, is that it's not our stuff. And so, that becomes one of the great things that we learn is that we hold things with an open hand. That way, if God wants to use them for something, he can use them. If God wants us to give something, well, then we say, take it. Because it's not ours. We just steward his stuff for 60, 70, 80, 90 years, whatever it is. It's all his. And that's a big realization. We hold things with an open hand. Now, what's cool about holding things with an open hand is that when you hold things with a closed hand, God has a very hard time putting more stuff in it, right? And I have seen as people hold things like this, they tend to be the people that God puts more stuff in. Not so that people can go, oh, well, that worked. But so that they continue to hold things with an open hand. God owns the stuff. And I just want to say to you, as you imagine, hey, what are some of your most prized possessions? What are some of the things that you own? And I don't mean valuable. I don't mean like a family heirloom or your kids or something like that. I'm talking about, is it a boat? Is it a classic car? Is it stocks? Is it stuff like that? Listen, I'm preparing you for next week. And I would have you think about those things and think to yourself, you know what? am I holding those things with an open hand? Is there a piece of property up north, or is there something that I'm holding like this? Or if God started to say, man, I want you to sell that and give, would my first instinct would be to, wait a second, that's mine? Or would I be freely doing that? Would you give? Could you give? Where's your heart in relation to understanding ownership? Second thing is this, allocation. That God gives a certain amount of resources to people. Now, the original word here is talent, and we use that word to say, hey, you know what, a guitar player is talented, or that person is a very talented person. But back then, it was just a sum of money. This is a financial parable. A talent was about $1,000 in today's money. In fact, some translations just translate it bag of gold. But he says in verse 15, to one, the landowner gave 5 talents. To another he gave 2, and to another he gave 1, each according to his ability. In other words, the landowner looks down and says, you know what, I think you could handle 5 talents of responsibility, and you 2, and you 1. And we notice this, because here's the thing. Our Constitution says what? All men are created equal. And that is totally true in regards to their worth. But it's not true in regards to our net worth. There are those of us who have been entrusted with more and those of us who have been entrusted with less. There are those of us who have had certain types of opportunities and certain of us that have had not that much opportunity. God has, for whatever reason, given some people more and some people less. And if you want to really see that, do some world travel. Every time I start to think, man, I don't have it very good. God hasn't blessed me with very much. Just open our eyes to the people in the rest of the world. And I'll tell you, that's one of the things that we're trying to do in this Devoted campaign is we've prayed throughout this with our families. I want my kids to understand how much God has blessed our family with. And one of the things that we're doing as a family is that we are giving up going to restaurants for a year. Now you say, well, that sounds really hard, but listen, it is very hard, okay? It is very hard. We've been doing this for 2 weeks, and it is crazy. But can I tell you something? This has been so cool. There are people in this world who, when they get up in the morning, they're thinking, what am I going to eat for this day? When they eat one meal, one of the things that is constantly on their mind is, where's my next meal going to come from? And our family, where we used to just get in a car and take off because we knew we could just grab food anytime we wanted, our families now get in a car, but before we get in the car, we're like, okay, we got to pack lunch, and then, wait, are we going to be out for dinner? Because then we got to pack that, and we got 3 kids, and we got to do this. We're like intentionally thinking through. I feel like it's working. You know what else is working? Our family's eating together more. Like together. You know what else is working? The sveltness of my figure right now. You know what I'm saying? Like for some reason, it's just more healthy what we're eating. And this is what's embarrassing, okay? This is what's embarrassing. Do you know how much money we were spending just on that? We honestly didn't even do it that much for the money. We were coming up with this, but do you know how much, if you added up the amount of money that we've saved in the last 2 weeks, if I extrapolate that over a 2-year commitment to this Devoted thing, it's thousands of dollars. It's thousands of dollars. And I don't know if maybe you just only do, one date night a week, or maybe you eat out 2 meals a week because you're doing lunches all the time. Maybe you're buying lunch for other people. I don't know. Maybe you go to Starbucks all the time and get your mocha frappuccino or whatever, and you grab all that with your shot of estrogen in there or whatever. You get your little foo-foo coffee drink. But if you add it up, we spend a lot of money on that stuff. So for us, we're trying to do this in a way, we're trying to give in a way that changes our family and the way we look at things, like how blessed we are. My kids are watching this. All right, third principle is this, the principle of accountability. That God expects me to use the money that He's giving me. He's made an investment in you. You say, no, I earned that money. Well, who gave you your brain, and who gave you your arms, and who gave you your fingers to type and all that stuff? Who gave you all that opportunity? God did. So it's all his, and we come back to that God has invested in us, and he expects us to use it wisely. Look in verse 19. After a long time, the master of those servants came back and settled accounts with them. Settled accounts with them. He looked over, hey, what did you do with the money that I gave you? Hey, how many of you are excited about getting audited? Nobody's excited about that, right? Unless you know that you've done well. I mean, God is going to come at some point and say, hey, how did you do with what I gave you? Romans says this, so each of us will give an account of himself to God. And here's the deal. For some people, it's going to be a scary thing. For other people, it's going to be like, I don't want him to see this part. And then there are those who will say, you know what? God, look what I did as an act of worship to you. Now you say, well, hold on. Are you talking about just giving to the church? Can I tell you this? Watch this. In the Old Testament, God gave a test to his people. It was a test of 10. That was always the number of testing in the Bible. That's why there's 10 commandments. That's why there were 10 plagues. It's the number of testing in Israel culture. And so God said, okay, when it comes to giving to the church, I'm going to say 10%. We call that tithing, right? And I grew up, I've learned that, and my parents made me do it, and we did it early in our life. But do you know what has sort of sometimes creeped into my mind and my heart? Is this idea that, you know what? 10% is God's and 90% is mine. When this audit happens, God, you're going to look at that 10%, and as long as I do that, well, I can just grab that 90% and just run and do whatever I want with that. Now, see, Jesus comes along, and he gives, with all of the law, we could talk about that, he gives a larger perspective, a more full understanding of what God was trying to teach through these old laws. And do you know what Jesus comes along to say? I believe Jesus would say, you're supposed to honor God. He doesn't say you're supposed to give 100%. He asked 2 people in the Bible to give 100% of what they had. I don't think he's probably not asking you to do that. But what he is doing is to say, you know what? I want you to honor me with 100%. I want you to honor me with 100% of every dollar that you have. Make sure that every dollar, every penny, not 10%, not 4%, whatever, all of it is going to go where God wants you to put it. Now, for us as a family, as we've been praying through this number that we're going to put on this card, that number for us, you know, I'm not just going to say, oh, 10%. For me, I'm saying, God, what you're calling us to as a church, how does this number represent my heart for that? God, this number that I'm putting down. And we've decided the number that we're putting down represents our heart for God. It represents my heart for lost people. It represents my heart to try to give in such a way so that, listen, my giving is now governing the rest of my budget. It's not, oh, I got a little extra, so I'm doing that. I'm telling you, we're putting a number on there that it's like, you know how sometimes you go out and you'll buy a house, and then you'll go, okay, but now because I bought a house, this is what I have left over to do other stuff. And so it's like your house begins to govern the way you do the rest of the stuff, or maybe for you it's retirement savings or whatever it is. The way we're thinking about this is I want my giving to govern the rest of our finances. And that's the number that we're putting on that card next week. The principle of utilization is the next one. It's wrong to bury my talents. It's wrong to bury my talents. You see, one of those servants went out with his 5, and he invested it, and he got 5 more. So he had 10. The one guy who had 2, he did the same thing. He got 4. But the guy who had 1 bag of gold went out and just buried it in the ground. He didn't even try. And look what the master said. He said, you wicked, lazy servant. You should have put my money on deposit with the banker so that when I returned, I'd at least have received it back with interest. And can I say this, when I talk about 100% participation, I know what it's like. I know. I'm the most skeptical guy. Listen, I know. You come into something like this and it's like you immediately can dismiss it rather than to get caught up in what God is doing. It's so easy to go, well, I don't have any extra. You use the same thing when it comes to debt. I can't get out of debt. I don't have any extra. You use the same thing when it comes to college savings or whatever. But listen, I want you to at least try to think about this. So I had our Financial Peace University folks made a list for me of things where people say, you know what, I don't have money to do, any margin for saving, any margin for giving, any margin for whatever. But they said, watch this, try these things. So I'll share these with you. Listen, here's the first one. Make a budget. Experts say that if we will write down the things that we're just giving our money to, that we will be able to find 15 to 25% more money just by writing it down. I just gave somebody a 15% raise. How cool is that, right? So 15 to 25%. Couponing. Have you met some of these couponers? It's like a cult, all right? There's people out there going, I'm double couponing at Kroger's on Thursday, but then on Tuesday we're going over here and I'm doing this and I'm doing that. And you can laugh at that if you want to, but you know what? It's representing hundreds of dollars a month for some families. It's amazing. Shop for better insurance rates. Just every 6 months, do that. Cut back on cable plans. They told me stop going out to eat. I wonder why they told me that. Anyway, quit smoking, forgo a vacation. What else? Buy good used cars. Sell something you don't need. Second job or overtime. Fix it before tossing it. That's one thing I don't do very well. Cash. Pay with cash. Do you know experts say that anytime you whip out a credit card or a debit card, rather than cash, you will spend 12 to 18% more on average. Isn't that crazy? That just by going to cash, I might free up 12 to 18%. Cut your own lawn, turn off your lights, turn down the heat, and begin to see God create some margin. The idea of just trying, of utilizing what God has given you. Okay, number 5, motivation. I was afraid and I went out and hid your talent in the ground. Why did this guy not invest? Because he was afraid. He didn't do what he sensed the master wanted him to do because he was afraid. And can I tell you just from experience here, a few years ago, wrote down a number on a commitment card for this church. It was the first time I'd ever done anything like that. I'd always been I'm a tither, that's what I do. But my family got together and we said, we're gonna do this thing and we're gonna stretch. And do you know what I was afraid of? I mean, there's lots to be afraid of when you do something like that. Because you go, okay, I'm gonna make a commitment, but how do I know what my business is gonna do? Or you say, I'm afraid of, somebody might get sick, we might have health bills, or there's a lot to be afraid of. My furnace could go out, whatever. But do you know what I was afraid of? I don't know if he's going to see this podcast, but I was afraid my father was going to ask me what I did, and he was going to think I was being foolish. I look up to my dad as he's a business guy, he's sharp, and I was just afraid my dad was going to think I was foolish. And I came across this thing from Jim Elliot, who was a martyr, who was a missionary martyr, and he had this quote, "A man is no fool to give up what he cannot keep to gain what he cannot lose." And that just hit my heart. Let me read it again. A man is no fool to give up what he cannot keep to gain what he cannot lose. And I put that number on the sheet. And then 2 years went by. Now, the story also is that at about the same time we put the number on the sheet, we moved into a house. When we moved into that house, we started making improvements on the house. We're going to put some basement. We're going to put some flooring in because it was a kind of a fixer-upper. And then we sold that house 2 years later. After a 2-year commitment with the church, we ended up selling the house. And it's just interesting. I didn't even make the connection at first. But we sold that house for 1.5 times. The profit on that house was 1.5 times what I had stretched to give to church. And that's the principle of reward. The last thing here says, "Well done, good and faithful servant. You've been faithful with a few things. I will let you steward. I will put you in charge of many things, of more things." And that is a principle that I have seen in my life. And it doesn't always happen monetarily or financially. I don't write a check to this church thinking, "Oh man, 1.5 times coming back, baby." You know, like write a check to the church and then pull this deal down or shoot the dice or whatever. No, that's not what it's about. But I have seen that as I have trusted God with more, as I try to give back, whether it's financially or whatever, God has entrusted me with more to steward. And I believe that's a principle that's biblical. And then the final thing here is just says this as part of the reward. It says, come and share in your master's happiness. Like we as a community celebrate generosity, there's something between you and God. When your family sets something out there that's a goal that's hard and you sacrifice and you come back to it and you struggle and something hard happens, but you stick with it and you go for it. There's something when you're able to do that, it's like at the end, it's a celebration. Look what we were able to do. And that's what we're seeing in this place. If you're not getting caught up in it, man, I just want to share with you that advanced commitment night was epic. God just smacked me in the face like the reality of this thing is bigger than I imagined. And so we took some video. I just want to share with you some of the stories from that night. Take a look at this.
Devoted means to us trusting God, not just with our finances, but just even everyday life. The biggest thing for us is that we felt God was calling us to a specific number, and we didn't really know how he was going to make that happen. And my husband got a raise, and we were like, oh my goodness, this is really what God's calling us to. And it's not even really about the money. It's about how God was calling us to trust him, and he provided, and he continues to provide for us every single day.
This Devoted series to me means trusting God in areas of my life that I've never trusted him before, and letting go and, just letting him handle everything.
What Devoted means for us is finally letting go of our own agenda, and in giving that to God, being able to watch what he does through our church, drawing his children to him.
Devoted for us means a couple different things. One, we're getting married actually in 20 days, and we can't wait. But for us, it means beginning our marriage sacrificially giving, beginning our marriage devoted.
For me, the Devoted for tonight means that God is on the move, and we get to be a part of that. And I'm so excited about that. I really am.
It's just amazing that we get to be a part of what he's doing, and that he is actually glad to have us along, that he's not just putting up with us, but it's part of his fun that he gets to bring us along with him.
There's been so much happening in our lives in 242 in the last 5 years, but I think the excitement in the Devoted campaign is what really touched our heart, even with just the buzz with this event tonight, and really with things going forward with the growth in Ann Arbor, the growth in Brighton. We're just excited to be a part of it and just to see what God's going to be able to do. And we're just humbled that we're just going to be a small part of God's work in Livingston County. Go Blue!
This Devoted commitment means to me that I am all in with God, and I can no longer just be half in or hold back and hope that I have some control over the outcome. I have to trust him and have faith and trust him to lead me and get rid of my fear.
This Devoted commitment means no more excuses. It's time to be all in, give everything, time, resources, and get excited about what God's doing in our community.
This Devoted commitment, I think it's going to be life-changing for us and for our family. We love 242. We appreciate the challenge, and we're up for it. We're devoted.
What Devoted means to me is the opportunity to bring a community center to Ann Arbor that's going to make a big impact in this city and help more people take next steps with God.
2 years ago, we were able to start attending 242 in Brighton because of the devotion of those who came before us. So now it's our pleasure, and we are blessed and honored to be able to devote ourselves for those that come after us. So praise God.
Some of those people in this room. Let's give it up for them. We appreciate that. The spirit of celebration is what we're going to go for next week as you come and you will do what those people have done and turn in those cards with a commitment. Let me just show you the card real quick. That's basically a card that has a worksheet on the top, as you can pray through that. Hopefully you have one of those now. You can take it home with you. If not, we have them up at the table out there. You can take those home and pray through that. And then the number at the bottom there is just where you would put your 2-year giving. Now that is not your regular giving or not just expanded giving. It is your regular giving plus your devoted step of faith. It's all in one. Just one number is all we need right there. And that's over the next 2 years. And here's what I want to say to you. If I could just, as we're preparing our church family for next week, there are those of you who are going to take for the very first time your first step in this generosity journey. You're going to make a commitment for the very first time. And I just want to say, as if I could put your pastor hat on here for a second, I just want you to know I'm really proud of you. And I think that God is in heaven going, you know what, I'm rejoicing at what these people are doing, beginning to let God in even on that area of their life. And you might put a 4-digit commitment down there or a 5-digit commitment down there. And I just want to say I'm proud of you. There are those of us that have been walking with God for a while. Maybe you're like me, maybe you've been a tither, or maybe you've been giving out of excess, or maybe it's been kind of an easy thing for you. And God's going to call you to a level of generosity that He's never called you to before. At that advanced commitment night, there was a lady, who told me that as she's praying through what house to buy, she said that she wanted a bigger home, kind of an upgrade to her home. And she said, as she was praying through it, she's single. And she didn't need it for space, but she thought, I really love this home and I really want to do this. And she thought it was going to put her in an area of town that was going to help her do more ministry. And she was praying through it. And she's like, I could have a small group here and I could use this home people could stay with me if they have hard times. I mean, she was really trying to think of it as a ministry tool, but she kept going back and forth. And she told me that as she prayed through this, what God told her to do was to buy the home, use it as a tool, honor God with that, and at the same time, make a commitment to her church in the amount that was the purchase price, to match the purchase price of her home. I got a report last night. I don't see the names. I didn't look through all of them. But I got a report from some of the advanced commitment night. And there are tons of 5-figure gifts in there. And there were several 6-figure gifts, 6-figure commitments in there. And I believe that there are people in this room who God is calling to a level of commitment that you've never been to before. 5, 6, you're going to think I'm crazy, but 7-figure gifts. There are people in this room that could do that. And I'm praying for you this week. We had a staff person who came and said, you know what, I want to do, this is an interesting way for them to think about it. They said, I want the largest check that I write every month to be to the church. This is a staff person. They said, you know, car payment, Verizon, whatever, even my mortgage. I want my check to the church to be the largest check I write each month. And I'm humbled by that. That challenges me. I'm not doing that. What is it that has to change in my mind for me to begin to think like that? What has to change in my heart? What decisions do I have to make and commitments do I have to make to be able to do stuff like that? God's calling some of us in this room to begin to think like that. And I just want you to know I'll be praying for you this week as you talk about that with your family. I want you to know that here's my prayer. My one prayer is this, that next week, as you walk forward and put a number on a card and put that card in a basket or whatever we're going to put up here, that what you're putting on that, the number that you're putting on there is exactly what God would call you to do. Not what I call you to do, not what you feel you're trying to earn God's love. I'm trying to relieve guilt from something I did in the past. None of that. I just want you to pray this week and say, God, what do you want me to do? And then write that number on that card. That's what I'm praying for you this week in Jesus' name.